Hi everybody, and welcome back to another week of From the Shelf, where we are going through The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. Today's chapter, chapter 6, is entitled Mr. Toad. It was a bright morning in the early part of summer. The river had resumed its wonted banks and its accustomed pace, and a hot sun seemed to be pulling everything green and bushy and spiky up out of the earth. The mole and the water rat had been up since dawn, very busy on matters connected with boats and the opening of the boating season. Painting and varnishing, mending paddles, repairing cushions, hunting for missing boat hooks, and so on, and were finishing breakfast when a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Bother," said the rat, all over egg. "See who it is, Mole, like a good chap, since you've finished." The mole went to attend the summons, and the rat heard him utter a cry of surprise. Then he flung the parlor door open and announced with much importance, "Mr. Badger!" This was a wonderful thing indeed, that the badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed on anybody. He generally had to be caught if you wanted him badly, as he slipped quietly along a hedgerow of an early morning or a late evening, or else hunted up in his own house in the middle of the wood, which was a serious undertaking. The badger strode heavily into the room, and stood looking at the two animals with an expression full of seriousness. The rat let his spoon fall on the tablecloth and sat open-mouthed. "The hour has come," said the badger at last. "What hour?" asked the rat uneasily, glancing at the clock. "Whose hour, you should rather say," replied the badger. "Why, Toad's hour, the hour of Toad. I said I would take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over, and I'm going to take him in hand today." "Toad's hour, of course!" cried the mole. "Hooray! I remember now. We'll teach him to be a sensible toad." "This very morning," continued the badger, "as I learned last night from a trustworthy source, another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall on approval or return. At this very moment, perhaps, Toad is busy arraying himself in those hideous habiliments so dear to him, which transform him from a good-looking toad into an object which throws any decent-minded animal that comes across it into a violent fit. We must be up and doing ere it is too late. You two animals will accompany me instantly to Toad Hall, and the work of rescue shall be accomplished." "Right you are," cried the rat. "We'll rescue the poor unhappy animal. We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted toad that ever was before we've done with him." They set up off the road on their mission of mercy, Badger leading the way. Animals when in company walk in a proper and sensible manner, in single file, instead of sprawling all across the road and being of no use or support to each other in case of sudden trouble or danger. They reached the carriage drive of Toad Hall to find, as the badger had anticipated, a shiny new motor car of great size, painted a bright red, standing in front of the house. As they neared the door, it was flung open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap, gaiters, and enormous overcoat, came swaggering down the steps. "Hello, come on, you fellows," he cried cheerfully on catching sight of them. "You're just in time to come with me for a jolly, His hearty accents faltered and fell away as he noticed the stern, unbending look on the countenances of his silent friends. The badger strode up the steps. "Take him inside," he said sternly to his companions. Then, as Toad was hustled through the door, struggling and protesting, he turned to the chauffeur in charge of the new motor car. "I'm afraid you won't be wanted today," he said. "Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He will not require the car. Please understand that this is final. You needn't wait." Then he followed the others inside and shut the door. "Now then," he said to the Toad when the four of them together stood in the hall, "first of all, take those ridiculous things off." "Shan't," replied the Toad with great spirit. "What is the meaning of this gross outrage? I demand an instant explanation." "Take them off him, then, you two," ordered the badger. They had to lay Toad out on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could get to work properly. "You knew it must come to this sooner or later, Toad," the badger explained severely. "You've disregarded all the warnings we've given you. You've gone on squandering the money your father left you, and you're getting us animals a bad name in the district by your furious driving and your smashes and your rows with the police. Independence is all very well, but we animals never allow our friends to make fool of themselves beyond a certain limit, and that limit you have reached." Now you're a good fellow in many respects, and I don't want to be too hard on you. I will make one more effort to bring you to reason. You will come with me and hear some facts about yourself, and we'll see whether you come out of that room the same Toad that you went in." He took Toad firmly by the arm, led him into the smoking room, and closed the door behind him. "That's no good," said the rat. "Talking to Toad will never cure him. He'll say anything." They made themselves comfortable in armchairs and waited patiently. Through the closed door they could hear just the long, continuous drone of the badger's voice, rising and falling. After some 3/4 of an hour, the door opened, and the badger reappeared, sullenly leading by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad. His skin hung baggily about him, his legs wobbled, and his cheeks were furrowed by the tears so plentifully called forth by the badger's moving discord. "Sit down there, Toad," said the badger kindly, pointing to a chair. "My friends, I am pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways. He is truly sorry for his misguided conduct in the past, and he has undertaken to give up motor cars entirely and forever. I have his solemn promise to that effect." "That is very good news," said the mole gravely. "Very good news indeed," observed the rat. If only... He was looking very hard at Toad as he said this, and could not help thinking he perceived something vaguely resembling a twinkle in that animal's still sorrowful eye. "There's only one thing more to be done," continued the badger. "Toad, I want you solemnly to repeat before your friends here what you fully admitted to me in the smoking room just now. First, you are sorry for what you've done, and you see the folly of it all?" There was a long pause. "No," he said a little sullenly, but stoutly. "I'm not sorry, and it wasn't folly at all. It was simply glorious." "What?" cried the badger, greatly scandalized. "You backsliding animal, didn't you tell me just now, in there—" "Oh, yes, in there. I'd have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear badger, and so moving and so convincing, and put all your points so frightfully well. You can do what you like with me in there, and you know it. But I've been searching my mind since and going over things, and I find that I am not a bit sorry or repentant, really." "Then you don't promise," said the badger, "never to touch a motor car again?" "Certainly not. On the contrary, I faithfully promise that the first motor car I see, pop, pop, off I go in it." "Told you so, didn't I?" observed the rat to the mole. "Very well, then," said the badger firmly, rising to his feet. "Since you won't yield to persuasion, we'll try what force can do. I feared it would come to this all along. You've often asked us three to come and stay with you, Toad, in this handsome house of yours. Well, now we're going to. When we've converted you to a proper point of view, we may quit, but not before. Take him upstairs and lock him in his bedroom while we arrange matters between ourselves." "It's for your own good, Toady, you know," said the rat kindly. "Think what fun we shall have together, just as we used to, when you've quite got over this painful attack of yours." "We'll take great care of everything for you till you're well, Toad," said the mole, "and we'll see your money isn't wasted as it has been." "No more of those regrettable incidents with the police, Toad," said the rat, "and no more weeks in the hospital being ordered about by female nurses, Toad." They descended the stair, Toad shouting abuse at them through the keyhole, and the three friends then met in conference on the situation. "It's going to be a tedious business," said the badger. "I've never seen Toad so determined. However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded. We shall have to take it in turns to be with him, till the poison has worked itself out of his system." They arranged watches accordingly. Each animal took in turns to sleep in Toad's room at night, and they divided the day up between them. At first, Toad was very trying to his careful guardians. When his violent paroxysms possessed him, he would arrange bedroom chairs in rude resemblance of a motor car, and would crouch on the foremost of them, bent forward and staring fixedly ahead, making uncouth and ghastly noises, when, turning a complete somersault, he would lie prostrate amid the ruins of the chairs, apparently completely satisfied for the moment. As time passed, however, these painful seizures grew gradually less frequent, and his friends strove to divert his mind into fresh channels, but his interest in other matters did not seem to revive, and he grew apparently languid and depressed. One fine morning the rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve the badger, whom he found fidgeting to be off and stretch his legs in a long ramble round his wood. "Toad's still in bed," he told the rat outside the door. "Can't get much out of him, except, 'Oh, leave him alone, he wants nothing. Perhaps he'll be better presently, it may pass off in time,' and so on. Now you look out, rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive and playing at being the hero of a Sunday school prize, then he's at his artfulest. There's sure to be something up. I know him." "How are you today, old chap?" inquired the rat cheerfully as he approached Toad's bedside. He had to wait some minutes for an answer. "Thank you so much, dear Ratty. So good of you to inquire. But first tell me how you are yourself, and the excellent Mole?" "Oh, we're all right," said the rat. "Mole is going out for a run round with Badger. They'll be out till lunchtime, so you and I will spend a pleasant morning together, and I'll do my best to amuse you." "Oh, dear, kind rat, how little you realize my condition, and how very far I am from jumping up now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I hate being a burden to my friends, and I do not expect to be one much longer. Indeed, I hope not." "Well, I hope not too," said the rat. "You've been a fine bother to us all this time, and I'm glad to hear it's going to stop. And in weather like this, and the boating season just beginning. It's too bad of you, Toad. It isn't the trouble we mind, but you're making us miss such an awful lot." "I'm afraid it is the trouble you mind, though," replied the Toad. "I can quite understand it. It's natural enough. You're tired of bothering about me. I mustn't ask you to do anything further. I'm a nuisance, I know." "You are indeed," said the rat. "But I tell you, I'd take any trouble on earth for you, if only you'd be a sensible animal." "If I thought that, Ratty, then I would beg you, for the last time probably, to step round to the village as quickly as possible, and fetch the doctor. But don't you bother. It's only a trouble, and perhaps we may as well let things take their course." "Why, what do you want a doctor for?" inquired the rat. He certainly lay very still and flat, and his voice was weaker and his manner much changed. "Surely you have noticed of late, but no, why should you? Noticing things is only trouble. Tomorrow, indeed, you may be saying to yourself, 'Oh, if only I had noticed sooner! If only I had done something!' But no, it's a trouble. Never mind, forget that I asked." "Look here, old man," said the rat. "Of course I'll fetch a doctor to you if you really think you want him, but you can hardly be bad enough for that yet. Let's talk about something else." "I fear, dear friend," said Toad, "that talk can do very little in a case like this, or doctors either. Still, one must grasp at the slightest straw. And by the way, while you are about it, I hate to give you additional trouble, but I happen to remember that you will pass the door. Would you mind at the same time asking the lawyer to step up? It would be a convenience to me, and there are moments, perhaps I should say there is a moment, that one must face disagreeable tasks at whatever cost." "A lawyer? Oh, he must be really bad," the affrighted rat said to himself, as he hurried from the room, not forgetting, however, to lock the door carefully behind him. Outside, he stopped to consider. The other two were far away, and he had no one to consult. It's best to be on the safe side. I've known Toad fancy himself frightfully bad before, but I've never heard him ask for a lawyer. If there's nothing really the matter, the doctor will tell him he's an old ass and cheer him up, and that will be something gained. I'd better humor him and go. It won't take very long." So he ran off to the village. The Toad, who had hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he heard the key turned in the lock, watched him eagerly from the windows till he disappeared down the carriage drive. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed as quickly as possible in the smartest suit he could lay hands on, filled his pockets with cash, which he took from a small drawer in the dressing table, and next, knotting the sheets from his bed together, he scrambled out, slid lightly to the ground, and taking the opposite direction to the rat, marched off light-heartedly, whistling a merry tune. It was a gloomy luncheon for Rat when the Badger and the Mole at length returned, and he had to face them at the table with his pitiful and unconvincing story. The Badger's remarks may be imagined, and therefore passed over, but it was painful to the Rat that even the Mole, though he took his friend's side as far as possible, could not help saying, "You've been a bit of a duffer this time, Ratty." Toad, too, of all animals. "He did it awfully well," said the Rat. "He did you awfully well," rejoined the Badger. "However, talking won't mend matters. He's got clear away for the time, that's certain, and the worst of it is, He'll be so conceited with what he'll think is cleverness that he may commit any folly. One comfort is we're free now and needn't waste any more of our precious time doing sentry. We'd better continue to sleep at Toad Hall for a while longer, though. Toad may be brought back at any moment on a stretcher or between two policemen." So spoke the Badger, not knowing what the future held in store. Meanwhile, Toad, gay and irresponsible, had walked briskly along the high road some miles from home. At first he took bypaths and crossed many fields and changed his course several times in case of pursuit. But now, feeling by this time safe from recapture and the sun smiling brightly on him, he almost danced along the road in his satisfaction and conceit. "Smart piece of work," he remarked to himself. "Brain against brute force, and brain came out on top. Poor old Ratty, my, won't he catch it when Badger gets back. A worthy fellow, Ratty, with many good qualities, but very little intelligence, and absolutely no education. I must take him in hand some day, and see if I can make something of him." Filled full of conceited thoughts such as these, he strode along, his head in the air, till he reached a little town where the sign of "The Red Lion," swinging across the road halfway down the main stream, reminded him that he had not breakfasted that day, and that he was exceedingly hungry. He marched into the inn, ordered the best lunch that could be provided, and sat down to eat it in the coffee room. He was about halfway through his meal when he heard an all too familiar sound approaching down the street. The "pop pop" drew nearer and nearer. The car could be heard to turn into the inn yard and come to a stop, and Toad had to hold on to the leg of the table to conceal his overmastering emotion. He slipped out of the room quietly, paid his bill at the bar, and as soon as he got outside sauntered round quietly. "There cannot be any harm in my only just looking at it." The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended. Toad walked slowly round it, inspecting, criticizing, musing deeply. "I wonder," he said to himself, "I wonder if this sort of car starts easily." Next moment, hardly knowing how he came about, he found that he had hold of the handle and was turning it. As the familiar sound broke forth, the old passion seized on Toad and completely mastered him. As if in a dream, he found himself seated in the driver's seat. As if in a dream, he pulled the lever and swung the car around the yard and out through the archway. And, as if in a dream, all sense of right and wrong, all fear of consequences seemed suspended. He increased his pace, and as the car devoured the street and leaped forth on the high road through the open country, he was only conscious that he was Toad once more. He chanted as he flew, and the car responded with sonorous drone. The miles were eaten up under him as he sped, he knew not whither, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour, reckless of what might come to him. "To my mind," observed the chairman of the bench of magistrates, "the only difficulty that presents himself in this otherwise very clear case is, how we can possibly make it sufficiently hot for the incorrigible rogue and hardened ruffian who we see cowering in the dock before us. Let me see, he has been found guilty of the clearest evidence, first, of stealing a valuable motor car, secondly, of driving to the public danger, and thirdly, of gross impertinence to the royal police. Mr. Clerk, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose for each of these offenses?" The clerk scratched his nose with his pen. "Some people would consider that stealing the motor car was the worst offense, and so it is. But cheeking the police undoubtedly carried the severest penalty, and so it is ought. Supposing you were to say 12 months for the theft, which is mild, and 3 years for the furious driving, which is lenient, and 15 years for the cheek, which was pretty bad sort of cheek, judging by what we've heard from the witness box. If added together correctly, taught up to 19 years. First rate," said the chairman. "So you'd better make it around 20 years and be on the safe side," concluded the clerk. "An excellent suggestion," said the chairman approvingly. "Prisoner, pull yourself together and try and stand up straight. It's going to be 20 years for you this time. And mind, if you appear before us again, upon any charge whatever, we shall have to deal with you very seriously." Then the brutal minions of the law fell upon the hapless Toad, loaded him with chains, and dragged him from the courthouse, shrieking, praying, protesting, across the marketplace, till they reached the door of the grimmest dungeon that lay in the heart of the innermost keep. There at last they paused, where an ancient jailer sat fingering a bunch of mighty keys. "Odds bodykins," said the sergeant of police, taking off his helmet and wiping his forehead. "Rouse thee, old loon, and take over from us this vile toad, a criminal of deepest guilt, and matchless artfulness and resource. Watch and ward him with all thy skill, and mark thee well, greybeard, should aught untoward befall, thy old head shall answer for this, and a murrain on both of them." The jailer nodded grimly, laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable toad. The rusty key creaked in the lock. The great door clanged behind them, and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all the length and breadth of merry England. All right, everybody, that is it. But I will see you guys next time on From the Shelf. Goodbye.